Hey everybody, this is Mr. Bob coming at you with another APUSH video. Today we're taking a look at topic 8.5, looking at American culture from 1945 to 1965. And when we're talking about the prevailing kind of mainstream, what you would call American culture after World War II, it is going to be tied to some very important themes. It's going to be tied to the idea of consumerism. It's going to be tied to the idea of conformity. And it is going to be tied to the idea of the impact of new communication technology. And when we do talk about all these things kind of coming together in one way, it's going to be most starkly felt with the advent of television. Radio had been the dominant mass medium since the 1920s, but starting in the late 1940s, television is going to capture the hearts of the American public. As you can see here, televisions back then very different from modern televisions. Much smaller screens, black and white, not nearly the the crisp, defined pictures that we see today with HD television. And as you can see here in this photograph as well, a television was commonly integrated into the family home as like a type of furniture unto itself. So you can see here that television is put into a wooden frame, a console that would be just part of your furniture, and yeah, just as heavy as you would imagine. Now note, as this family is clearly enjoying, the television is going to quickly become the centerpiece of the American family room. And within just a matter of a few years, about a decade, most Americans are going to have a television. I mean, this is going to be unbelievably popular in its span across America. Now, with Americans now glued to the tube, if you will, well, what's going to be coming out of the screen is going to be very significant from a cultural perspective, and that's going to be reflected in the the programming that is going to be common on television in those days. In those days, back then, you really only had two TV channels. You had NBC and you had CBS. ABC is going to come a little bit later, and we're a long way from Fox Television, and we're a long way from cable television. So we don't even have PBS yet. We just have those two channels. Now, what you're going to be seeing on television is going to be reflecting what are going to be the prevailing values of mainstream American society at this time. And this is a period of time where conservatism and conformity are going to be the dominant themes. This is a period of time, of course, where we see the effects of the GI Bill coming into play. American veterans have come home. They're going to be able to get a good college education. They're going to be able to get those no money down home loans to be able to achieve the American dream, at least as we've kind of been taught up to that point. And that involves moving to the suburbs, having the white picket fence, the 2-3 kids, the dog, the cat, barbecue set, that whole thing. And television is going to reflect all of that. In those days, family was really the center of what you saw on TV. Here's an example of this. One of the more popular shows in the 1950s was Father Knows Best. And when you take a look at this, obviously you can see some of the mainstream values of the time is that the father is the center of the household. Even though, yes, over here, picture to the right, he's married, has a wife. It's not mom and dad know best. It's dad, father knows best. And so it's certainly sending a message of a very patriarchal type society, very conservative, very traditional. As you can see here, everybody is dressed nicely, formally. It's sending very clear middle class values. At the time, this is another very popular show of the era. This is Leave It to Beaver. The idea being is that, what should America, what should television be reflecting about America is a sense that America should be middle class. It should be suburban. It should be a traditional family where mom and dad are married. They have children. And when you watch the television, these television shows, they don't really come close to reflecting the greater challenges that society faced, or certainly the diversity that was and is still today America. You never saw programming in this era that had more of a kind of a dramatic topic in a given episode, other than maybe, I don't know, Beaver accidentally dented dad's car with a baseball playing catch with his brother. That's about, as dramatic as it gets. And you never see anybody in these shows that deal with real common things that existed in those days. You didn't have issues of divorce. You didn't have issues of domestic abuse. You didn't have, issues, that dealt with any kind of, homosexuality, LGBTQ based themes. That was certainly considered outside the mainstream. And also, a very important component of this, and this was clearly, defined, was trying to make television as wide as possible in those days. There was very little to no ethnic diversity on television. And when you did see it, it did unfortunately try to reinforce stereotypical attitudes on race, things like that, that nobody of color is going to be given any prominence in any kind of television show in those days. And to be honest, women rarely also were viewed as, the prominent feature star of any kind of a television show. Now, that being said, there was one key example, and ironically enough, it's going to be the most popular show of the era. It's going to be I Love Lucy. I mean, this is a show that's so popular that I'm sure many of you that are decades removed from when this show was originally on television have probably heard of. The star of the show is Lucille Ball, pictured here on the left, and her husband, Desi Arnaz, pictured to the right. He is going to break that typical mold of who you saw on television. He is Latino. He's a Cuban, and he doesn't try to hide. He doesn't try to cover up. In fact, this couple, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, that play husband and wife on the show, are able to be this couple on television, in part because they actually were a married couple. They actually, were married in real life as they were making this show. But once again, to kind of give you a sense of these very conservative values, that even on a show that actually had a real married couple on there as the stars of the show, there was nothing that, was anything remotely close to the idea that they had any kind of an intimate life. You never saw, for example, that there was 2 beds in the bedroom, not 1 bed in the bedroom, things like that. So understand that these are promoting very, very conservative, traditional values that stress middle class, conformity, and very, very, white, for lack of a better phrase. Now, also a key part of television is the growth of advertising that's going to be common in this time period. Television, of course, advertising has, of course, been a staple of American popular culture for decades up to this point. But what had started out as, flyers and leaflets and billboards on the highway to then radio advertising is now, of course, going to be coming to television as well. Now, it's a little hard for me to kind of show you the television advertising in this video, but if you do look at prevailing advertising of this time period, you can see, once again, some of these prevailing values. And these values are very aspirational. Once again, middle class. Once again, white folks are almost exclusively the focus of advertising. As you can see here in this advertisement for American Express traveler's checks, the idea being is that now the modern 1950s, couple or family can enjoy the benefits of this booming economy of the time, the ability to travel and have fun and have a nice car, and everything is nice and everything is doing really, really well, kind of speaking to this idea that this is what America is in the 1950s. Here's another one here, advertising a 1952 Dodge. Once again, the idea being is that folks are enjoying the good life. Folks are enjoying greater wealth, and you should spend that wealth, embrace that wealth. Once again, there's a lot of parallels in the 1950s to what we saw in the 1920s in terms of consumerism. In fact, the 1950s even goes arguably beyond that in terms of a desire for consumerism. Now, be aware, though, that as we talk about this greater expanded economy and what advertising and shopping and commerce is going to be looking like, it is going to continue to transform. And a lot of it is tied to this growing suburbanization of the era. What used to be, your local, urban mom and pop, kind of stores are falling very quickly by the wayside. And as we're moving out to these suburban areas, they're being replaced more and more by, franchise stores, things like, Woolworths and Sears and even, restaurants like McDonald's and things like that are quickly sweeping across America. And, where we go to do our shopping is going to be changing. You used to walk to the store if you lived in an urban area, but now with suburban sprawl, you're not going to be able to realistically do that. Folks have cars very readily now, and so folks are going to be driving to these shopping centers. Like you can see this one right here. I believe this is from somewhere in Iowa. These vast strip malls, and we're going to eventually start to see the beginning of what we call the traditional mall, which becomes a little bit more common in the 1960s and 70s, but still we see the beginnings of that. The idea being is that, commerce is tied to what you can access with your car, not what you can by foot. And note, as this shopping moves out to suburban areas, that means there's going to be less in urban areas, and that's only going to grow that divide between suburban and urban America, which is also going to be a clear economic divide, a racial divide, all of that kind of stuff. In addition to that, some other things to keep in mind with American culture: growth and popularity of paperback books, very cheap, easy to access, so that's going to be popular. But a lot of this is going to be tied to music. As you take a look here in this photograph of a couple of teenagers from the era, what started as the phonograph is going to be looking more like the modern record player. And this is going to be relatively cheap entertainment. You could buy records, listen to music from the convenience of your own home. And tying in with this is this emergence of a thing called teenager, where American families, by and large, now have the wealth and the security that as somebody that is, between, 13 and 20, you're going to not necessarily have to work like your predecessors had. You've got comfort. You've got extra spending money. Your parents may have given you this thing called an allowance, which is only something that rich people had before, and you're going to spend that money on all sorts of things. You might be buying it on, Levi's jeans and, maybe taking your date out to the movies, but also spending it on music and not necessarily the music that your parents enjoyed. The teenagers of the 1950s, they're not really going to be embracing, Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra like their parents did, but music that is going to be coming from the black community and is going to be seen as, well, and nothing short of culturally dangerous according to their parents, and that's going to be rock and roll. And of course, when we talk about rock and roll is going to be, this very fast, upbeat music coming from rhythm and blues, once again coming from the African American community. In fact, rock and roll was strictly black music for a number of years, until a young man from originally Tupelo, Mississippi, but eventually Memphis, Tennessee, is going to embrace this style of music and transform it across the country. And of course, you guys know what I'm talking about. We're talking about Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley is going to be, considered the king of rock and roll, but from a cultural perspective, he is going to be an iconoclast. The idea being is that you can, get down as a young person and, and it be embraced by everybody. Black kids had already been embracing this, but now white kids are going to be embracing as well. But parents are going to be concerned. Parents are going to be nervous about, is this going to be promoting premarital sex? Is it going to be promoting, questioning authority and breaking down social norms, especially racial social norms and things like that? And it's all true, yeah, it does, and that's actually part of the greatness of rock and roll. But at that time, there's a lot of controversy. Elvis Presley, as pictured here, was known for his, at least for the time, kind of salacious dancing moves. In fact, it was so controversial that when he was first on the Ed Sullivan Show, which is a very popular variety show in the 1950s, he was only shown from the waist up, so as to shield the public, especially children, from his sexualized dancing, if you will. In fact, he was so known for this at the time. His nickname was Elvis the Pelvis. But understand what is now starting to be a groundswell culturally in America in the 50s. We're starting to question things to some degree. We're not embracing necessarily what our parents embraced. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just starting right now. It's only going to grow. It's only going to get more expansive. And once we get into the 1960s, it's really going to be divisive. So anyhow, we're going to leave it there. No.